Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay. Be a first, but not an only. As a society, we equate being first to being the best of the best. The Olympics is a great example. We have first, second, third, and everyone wants to be first. And for most, you want to stand on that podium by yourself. Also, I have a little bit of movie trivia. Does anyone know what this quote is from? If you ain't first, you last. Yes, there you go, there you go. All right, Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly. But joking aside, however, at some point, we equate being first as being only, and even more, as if I'm at the top, there isn't room for anybody else, which is an idea that is adverse to our own success, and it can be. It should never be just be first and only, but always be first, but not only. But before I start my topic, if this was in fact taking place in my living room, I, or we, see not only, we, would get to know each other first. So let's do that. In a non-verbal way, of course, or else we would not be able to hear anyone else's conversations, and my lovely companions on the stage would not have a chance to tell their stories. So, in order to become acquaintances, please raise your hand when I call something that you can relate to. Mom, daughter, grandmother, sister, teacher, mentor, mentee, Peloton user, junior league member, a soror of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, inventor, entrepreneur, facilitator, procrastinator, and finally, who here puts their pants legs on one at a time? Everybody's hands up, everybody's hands up. All right, I throw that last one out there because I say it all the time. Regardless of one's status, culture, upbringing, place, level of experience, or whatever, we are all human beings and do things the same, and many of us share similar experiences. This evening, I want to share with you a thematic experience as a woman of color, African American, a black woman. And unfortunately, I don't believe my experience is necessarily unique to me. Okay, so now I feel a little bit more comfortable. Everybody's raised their hands. We got all that stretching out the way. I stand before you as a first and sometimes only, the oldest first grandchild, the first African-American president of the Junior League of Lehigh Valley, the first African-American councilwoman on the Nazareth Borough Council. To become a first, as some of you can relate, is literally to be forged in fire. You grind, you practice, you compete, you give your time, sweat, and tears to reach some of those first milestones. My being first was a responsibility I learned at a young age. Being a role model to my siblings, cousins, my god sister, that one I didn't even realize until she told me last year. I was very surprised about that being someone's role model. My dad drilled those things into me. My parents reinforced that there was no limits to my greatness. As a black child in the 70s with educators for parents, this was their main goal to me and my siblings. Representation matters, and my parents hammered this point home through various meetings. My classmates and I met with many black doctors, lawyers, engineers, architects, and activists as possible. My mom, bless her heart, rest in peace, she passed away this past summer, even colored brown representation into those books. Remember those ABC books that you would have with the kings and queens? She took the crayon and colored them all brown, just so I would know, to make sure that I knew the impossible was possible. It was never a question of could, but more of a question of when I would. But like I tell my daughter, I was not always so confident. I have two stories I want to tell regarding this example, since most people do not believe me when I say that confidence and courage is something you develop, sometimes, if you're lucky. As children, we are fearless. As we become teens, we develop fears, and as adults, we know fear, pain, and perceived consequences of our choices. So the first story I'm going to talk about is a story between me and my mom. So many people, I'm sure, have gone up to parent-teacher conference with their parent, and my mom was a little shorter than me. And we went up, and I was in, I think it was 7th grade. And we go in, and I was afraid of my Spanish teacher. Mrs. Durant, she had blonde hair. I was afraid of her. So we're going through the parent-teacher conference, and people who know me always know that I correct people when they say my name wrong. So I'm sitting there, and she's saying, Lauren, 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 Lauren. Finally, my mother stopped her. And my mother was not the disciplinarian of the house. So for her to speak up and stop someone, that's a big deal. And she said, you must have the wrong child, because my daughter's name is Laureen. I don't know who you're talking about. So then my mother, looks at me, and I'm sitting there like, and she says, and the teacher looks at me, she's like, Lauren? And I'm like, and we worked it out, but when we got out of there, my mom's like, don't ever let someone mispronounce your name wrong. We named you Laureen, and that's your name. And for my mother to say something like that, especially when she was not the disciplinarian in my house, was a big deal. So that was the first thing. So being first is also learning failure at a cost, but something that can be prevented through hard work. I'm on this stage publicly speaking, but it does not come easy to me. It is something that I had to learn, and here's another story I want to tell you. This was in 7th grade also. 7th grade was one of those tumultuous, it was a year that I'm like, oh, learning who I am. So for many of y'all, I'm sure you've had the experience of either being in the Honor Society or your children being in the Honor Society, but you remember they have the whole, you get up there, you say your speech, you light the candle, it's a big deal. And I had I had character was which one I had to memorize and say. So you're going through, and you got like 2 weeks, and it's a big deal. You go home, you tell your father, you tell your mom, and you're sitting there with the index cards. And finally I decide, well, I've had enough, I'm done, I got this. And my father's like, I don't think you got it. I'm like, Dad, I got this. I don't think you got it. I got it. He's like, fine, you got it, go ahead. So the night of, we go up there, and you know, they have the backup, right? So they have the index cards and everything, so I'm feeling good. We're on stage, I'm feeling good. And character wasn't like the first one. So I was like 3rd, 4th, middle of the round. So everybody else had gone up. Without the cards, they're doing it. I'm like, okay. I get up there, I look up, and I look out, and I just remember seeing the clock, like there's a clock in the back right now, and I forgot everything. Literally forgot everything. And I'm like, so at this point, you have some choices you gotta make here. You got the choice of, I can leave the stage and walk out and just keep going and don't know where I'm going, but just keep going. I can, just sit back down and just be like, you're next. Or I can figure out, all right, the cards are up here, I can do this. So I get the cards. You would think that would be the end of the story. Cards go everywhere. so now I'm like, okay, same scenarios, but now I have to add, I can pick up the cards. So I'm like, and I remember my principal, Mrs. Miller, sitting in the front row, and she's like, breathe, breathe. So I pick up the cards, and as I get up to gather myself, I hear a noise, right? And I'm like, what's, and I hear shh, shh, shh. And I'm like, and then I hear laughter. And in the back, there's my dad. I told her she didn't know it. I told her she didn't know it. The people are shushing her, and I'm, so I'm just like, I told my dad I was doing the speech, and he's like, oh, I said, I'll be talking about you. He's like, oh boy. But I get the cards back together, and I go, and I finish the speech, obviously. I've done some public speaking, but I will tell you, when I came here for the rehearsal yesterday, I was so happy that they're like, oh, you can read it. I'm like, yes. Because as you remember, procrastinator, I didn't have my index cards ready or anything. I was going to subcontract that to my daughter. But anyway, so these are things you go through, things that you triumph. Being first, my high school, there was 60 girls out of 200, 350 guys. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, manufacturing engineer, continuous improvement manager. Didn't get any better. It's still all guys. But anyway, but wasn't drilled into me, when we talk about these things, something that wasn't drilled into me about being first but not being only. My father was always like, where's the extra credit? How much points? Always be at the top. There was no talk about sharing the top. There was no talk about, oh, it's great that this person had the same grade. It was you had to be the best. So this comes later in life, in my career. And I mean, who doesn't like the spotlight, you know? You get the accolades, you get the praise, you get the different invites to places that you never think you'd be invited to. So you enjoy that. You like being first and only. But after a while, being first and only becomes very lonely. You're up there, you don't have anyone to joke around with, you're sitting there, you do the waves, you're like, oh, hi, how are you, you know? You see something that someone might be wearing something that's a little color, you don't have anyone to talk to about it, you don't have any person to gossip and be like, did you see what they were wearing? No, you just sit there, you're like, this is great, yeah, hey. And what's worse, not only not having someone to commiserate with, but you don't have anyone to bounce ideas off of. You don't have anyone to say, well, what do you think? What do you think I should do? Or, hey, do you think my point of view is the right way to go? Or you don't have anyone that has similar points of views or experiences. So how do you change from only to becoming maybe? How do you change? Well, I changed this by mentoring and growing people. So I have my other story that I want to tell is that, let's see, 2013, moved to the Poconos from Long Island, got a job, and there was this college student, double major. She was an intern. She came to work there. We became friends, and I became her informal mentor. I was being mentored by the general manager at the time, so she was mentoring me. I was mentoring her. Go through the ranks, and we had this program that's white belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt program. Mentor her through that. And I told her as I was mentoring her, because it's obvious that she is going to be a shining star. You know, the biggest compliment of a mentor is to have your mentee surpass you, have your mentee do better than you, have your mentee go all the way to the stars and back, and you wave and you're like, oh, I'm happy for you, that's a great job. That's like the biggest compliment to a mentor, which has happened to her. But me, also, I always like something in return. I'm going to be true about it. I'm not going to say, oh, you know, I like those favors. I cultivate favors, okay? So my thing to her was, as you go, when you finally reach your pinnacle, remember me. What I want is a cozy job. I don't want to be there in the office every day. I want to come in. I want to mentor other people. I'll only do it for 2 years because I have a lot of mentees, so I could flip from job to job. And that's what I want, and I will be the hardest worker, but please don't expect me to be there 9 to 5 and Monday through Friday. I will get the work done, but I don't want to be there all the time. So she's like, okay, cool. She went on to be a director. I think she's almost like a VP. And the funny thing is, a couple of weeks ago, she called me. She's like, I have that job for you. Of course, it was in Georgia, and I'm like, well, you know, I didn't get the specification. I like to stay where I am. She's like, all right, we'll keep trying. But she had the job for me. So she's bringing, you know, we're bringing each other along. And that is just something that is kind of unheard of when you think about it, you know, because you don't know when you start out that what these relationships are going to turn into. You just know that it's the right thing to do, and you know that that's something you have to do. So the question that I often ask myself as I prepare for this night is talking about the environment of what you're being first in, and does it matter? Like I said, I'm an engineer, I'm a process improvement engineer. I know all about setting up an experiment. For an experiment to be factual, you need to have the same facts and just the one variable. So I have 2 situations to compare this to. Both situations happen in Lehigh Valley, so that's a fixed specification. Both situations have been held by women, but never an African-American woman, never a black woman. Both organizations were not initially designed for me to be a member, me as an African-American woman. You know, the color of the skin, that is still something that we struggle with. So the one variable that I had, one is a women volunteer organization, Junior League of Lehigh Valley, love them. Like I said, I was the past president, 2019 to 2020, wouldn't change a thing about it. The other one is the organization where I'm predominantly with older white men, Narrowsburg Borough Council. That too has some great points to it. Understanding, being appointed, going in and giving my points of view. But I ask the question again, does the environment for what you are first in matter when everything is the same but the color of your skin? The environments that you are going into doesn't matter. And unfortunately, the answer is still no. In both spaces where the difference is me being first on the color of my skin, I face the same challenges. To be first but not an only. The expectations and what happens will be the same. I was told, I wasn't thought that you would be for that role, so you're always going to face the expectations where some people want you to fail, and then you're going to have the expectations where some people want you to succeed, and they think they're great and for you to be successful. Now, it's really hard for me to say that first point out loud, that people want you to fail. But that is the true situation of some of the situations that we're in. Just in general, it doesn't matter whether you're a man, woman, a black person, white person, some situations you go into and people want you to fail for whatever their reasons are. We cannot even comprehend. So those are challenges. But what I want to say is that this is a truth and this is a reality and this is the world that I and others and we all still live in. And a truth that cannot and should not be ignored. But what I want to say and what I want to challenge all of us in this room right now is that if you're in a meeting room and you notice others belong in that meeting room that are not there, stop and say something. I mean, sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, bring them in. Sometimes they'll look at you like you're crazy and be like, ugh. But next time, say it again and keep saying it until the right people in the room, until the people that should be in that room are invited to the table, are invited to the room, are invited to give their opinions and their thoughts. If someone is struggling and you can think you can help them. Don't sit there and be like, oh, I thought I could have helped. I didn't realize that. None of that. Help them. Help them. Bring others along. Like I said, it is lonely at the top, and you stumble very easily. But if you have brought others along, when you stumble, they're there to catch you, they're there to bring you up, and vice versa. I want to leave you with a series of quotes that I believe with all of my being by my Sora Shirley Chisholm. You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines. If they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring a folding chair. I am and always will be a catalyst for change. And now, here's my quote. Be a first, but not an only. Thank you and good night.